So we're reviewing the pilot episode of Once Upon a Time.
Yes.
So, beginning of the show, title card, Once Upon a Time. That's a good beginning because you're talking about your classic fairy tale, and all of them start out with that line.
Yeah,
so that's a good idea.
Yeah.
But then they stop us in our tracks when they say, Once Upon a Time, these are the characters you know, but not really.
Right, so we're thinking, oh, how are these characters going to be changed? But then they open up with us in the middle of the action where the prince is going to save Snow White, and we're supposed to automatically know that that's Snow White already. So we're still supposed to rely on our knowledge of the fairy tales to understand.
We started out with Snow White, and then immediately we're supposed to care because I don't even know why exactly we're supposed to care. I mean, there's the 7 dwarfs all around her, but they're not even crying. They just look really sad.
Right, and that one still looks really grumpy. So, and then it's like we don't even understand. Like, we know from prior knowledge that Snow White was poisoned, right, by the evil queen. But then when they start off like that, we're not invested in like, oh, we feel sad too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so there's no chance for us to connect to the characters yet. We're just thrown into the middle. I mean, which could be a good technique to start a story, but then we should still have some kind of like connection to the characters so that we can feel like, oh, this is sad, or oh, this is important. We're just like, oh, okay, what's going on, even though we already know, right?
It could have been simple. I mean, it could have been one of the dwarves would be crying and then saying, oh, the evil witch has poisoned her. Right. So then we're introduced to this evil character already. Right. And then we start caring a little, like, what's going on. Even if we don't know from hearing Snow White before. We're introduced to characters already. Our main characters. Snow White, there's a prince that's come to save her, and then there's a bad guy that's trying to mess them up.
Right, and like in the beginning when they say, like, this Once Upon a Time, and then they just say all the major characters, you know,
yeah, that's another problem.
In the beginning. Why couldn't they just have said, this is a story, Once Upon a Time, this is a story of Snow White, but it's not the Snow White that you know, and then we can kind of, you know, and then even though we're supposed to already know it, why not, like, in a good story, you get background still. Even if you already know the story, you like to read it again because that's how a story is. It tells you like what you're supposed to know before you get into the action, right? So why couldn't they just have said, just recapped it, like there's an evil queen, you know, and this is like her 3rd attempt to kill Snow White, and it's been successful, or whatever, 2nd or 3rd attempt, whatever, and yeah, so why not like get us to see like how bad the queen is, or like how good Snow White is, or whatever, and then so that way when she dies, like we feel sad, you know, or whatever, or we feel like the urgency of the prince coming in and like trying to bring her back to life, or whatever. So
yeah, so then that brings up I think putting these characters to scale in their world.
Yeah, that's
because
a good point.
we see a castle, we see a huge land that he's passing through on his horse to get to Snow White, but then we don't see like more characters than that. We only see like when they have the round table to decide.
Like they say all the major characters you know are in this forest, and we see Geppetto,
and then we see
Pinocchio, we see the dwarves, and that's pretty much it. And then when we're introduced to the town later, we see Grandmother and Little Red Riding Hood. And then of course we see the queen, and Rumpelstiltskin. But we still, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, so then we wonder, why should we care? Why should the viewers care about Snow White and the prince? And why should this fairy tale land be caring about them as well? Why are they fighting for these characters?
Right. So we still don't get how important like it is.
Yeah, it's not even much of a force either. They say all the characters, they give us like 5 or 6, and they're supposed to be the this huge force that's gonna help them out.
Yeah, and then we don't even get how they're connected. I mean, I know it's supposed to be mysterious how Rumpelstiltskin is connected to them, and I kind of see, like, you know, that's pretty cool where they're going with that, if, you know, they're doing something new with that. But then it's like, why should Geppetto and Pinocchio be connected to Snow White? You know, why should Snow White be the most important, like, fairy tale? We don't even see Cinderella, or, you know, if all the major characters are there, where are the other fairy tales, and how are they all connected? And if they don't succeed, like, then how is it gonna affect, like, fairy tales, like, forever or something? You know, like, what's so important about it?
And then we're introduced to the evil queen, right
at the wedding,
who is a very good actress.
Yes.
I think she was one of the more believable characters in this story. But then there's no sense of urgency around her either, because she's pretty mad, but all we've seen her do, because people are just telling us, they keep telling us things in this show.
Quite nonchalantly as well.
So then the only thing we see is that she's messed up their wedding.
Yeah.
Which is bad, but
it's not evil.
Yeah, it's not evil. And then she casts this spell saying that they're gonna lose everything.
They're gonna be stuck in time.
Yeah, they're gonna lose everything that they love.
Their happy ending, yeah.
But there's still no sense of urgency, because in like 2 seconds we see that
she's pregnant.
She's pregnant. So we know they've had at least 9 months to think about this.
Right.
And then they're not even that scared. I mean, she's saying, "Oh, what's gonna happen?" I'm like stressed out because...
Yeah, I'm stressed out. And he's like, "Oh, don't worry about it," you know. And she's like, "Yeah, she tried to poison me, like, with apple, because she thought, like, I was prettier than her," you know. It's, like, laughable.
Yeah.
I don't feel danger.
And you were making a point yesterday after we watched that, about the original Snow White. You were saying, what were you saying about the, how scary it is that this older, in the original Snow White,
it's a child. It's a young person. Like, she's not fully. We're not fully told that she's an adult. Like, we can. I think it's more like we're to assume that she's a young girl. Like, probably 16. You know, like a older teenager. And then we have this adult who's supposed to be her caregiver, like her stepmother, who's trying to kill her. I mean, how scary is that in real life, to have somebody older than you who's supposed to love you,
care of you,
trying to kill you, first hiring an assassin, hiring like a hunter to kill you, right? And then also like using magic,
all because she thinks that she's threatened by the young girl's beauty.
Yes, which is totally ridiculous, but when you put it in terms of like she's willing to murder somebody over
it because of that small
reason, then that shows how evil. Scary she is, right? But here we just have some girl who just busts into her wedding and is all, "Oh really? Okay, well then you think you have your happy ending now, but like, you know, I've ruined I'll let you have your wedding," even though she technically already ruined it. I'll let you get preggers. Yeah, but then after
watch out.
I'm going to freeze you in time. And she doesn't even say like how, you know, like maybe I don't need to see violence to be scared. She could have been like, "All your world will be destroyed," or you know, you're like, "What?" You know, but then it's more like, "I'm going to keep you in a place where you're still going to live, but then your happy ending is gone." You know, and then that's supposed to be reality. So, like, what does that mean? Like, we're living in a...
Well, like, we'll get to that. We'll get to that, because...
But I still don't see that... The good versus evil. And if they're going for, oh, well, sometimes it's not clear-cut, then it's not a fairy tale. Because if you're giving us a fairy tale, then there has to be... There has to be an obvious good and an obvious bad, and that obvious bad has to be developed, but we don't get any development of anybody's character in the beginning, so I don't feel invested. You know, like why should I care? You know, only because I already know the fairy tale.
Yeah, so I guess you could bring up that point about. Okay, I guess since we're talking about acting, because we did bring up the acting of the queen, the evil queen.
Which is pretty good.
Yeah. Okay, so we don't want to say that people are old looking, okay? We don't
like, yeah, the age of the character doesn't matter so much. So if they chose a Snow White that was older than a young girl,
yeah,
that's fine.
That's fine.
And then if they chose to have, we'll get into that later, why they chose to have Emma, their daughter, show up. But if she's going to be older as well, then we have several issues with that, right? But then we'll get into that later too. But like, if I'm supposed to believe that she's their daughter, it would have been nice to have them have an age gap. Because in real life, these characters are all around the same age. The prince is like 30, the Snow White is 31, and then the daughter is 32. And so if they were going to do that, then they should have done something with the makeup to show like that the parents are, older than the daughter, or something like that, or at least have Snow White, like you said yesterday, be ethereal and have something like different about her, so that there could be some kind of like connection between her, like Snow White and her daughter. Because when they meet each other, there's nothing that even clicks.
Yeah.
They're talking about her own son, like Snow White's grandson and Emma's son. They're talking about this boy they've met because of him, and yet there's no sense of like connection.
Yeah.
So I think that it would have been better if at least Emma had been younger, or the parents had been older, and then there could have been that kind of like some kind of bond between them, versus like them looking like sisters practically.
Yeah, which is another, like, why aren't the characters in the fairy tale land speaking in a more formal way? Because there's no separation. It seems like it's just regular day speech that they're speaking in this.
Yeah, and I think they're trying to make this point, like, they already said this once upon a time, this is a fairy tale, but then they say once upon a time, like, we're supposed to be introduced to this fairy tale, and then they tell us, but it's not what you think. So I think when they do the whole like regular speech when they're in the fairy tale land, they're trying to make the characters more believable, so that when we see them in fairyland, they're speaking our kind of language, like what we speak now. But I think if they're going to say that this is a fairy tale, even if it isn't the typical fairy tale, there should still be elements of what a fairy tale is, and that there's something, like you said, there's something different about them. They're separate from us in some way. That's what makes them a fairy tale. They can be believable characters, but there's something special about them. So if they're going to separate them in a fairyland, then they should have their own fairy tale speech, or at least look, like you said, ethereal, or look mystical or magical, but they just look like regular characters.
Yeah, because the actress that they picked for
Snow
White, she just didn't look ethereal enough.
Yeah.
She didn't look like... Well, I don't want to compare her to anybody, but I mean, like, if you look at, like you were saying last night, you look at the elves in Lord of the Rings. They're what, thousands of years old, but Peter Jackson still made them look like fairy tale characters. There's something special about them.
And even though they weren't necessarily young, like, you can't say that all the characters that played elves are really young. That's not true.
No, it's not. And
you can't say that they were all particularly like model gorgeous or whatever. Like, they were all good looking characters, but then they were magnified by the way that they were presented on screen. So they had that like radiance about them, or something different about them. Like, they all had the long hair, or like the clothes that they were wearing were different than everybody else's. So it's not so much that you had to choose like super pretty, it's like crazy pretty people and crazy like young people. No, it was just like
you
regular
have to show
people.
them in a different way, so that we know these are the main characters in this fairy tale land that we're supposed to care about.
Right. there has to be something, a distinguishing mark about them. Mm-hmm. If they're gonna say Snow White and the prince are the main characters, what about them is so...
Yeah.
Like, why do the other characters feel like you said, protecting them? What's so special about them?
Yeah, they were very weak characters.
Yeah, and then if you're going to say this is a fairy tale, in regular fairy tales there are flat characters. Mm-hmm. We don't know much about Snow White in the regular fairy tale, like in the old fairy tale, right? We just know that she's like a girl that's being like persecuted by her stepmother, and then we don't know much about her, like how she grew up or like, you know, what her favorite book is or stuff like that. But if you're gonna say this is a different type of fairy tale, then you can break that rule of having a flat character and develop it. Because like we were talking about Ever After, that's a different type of Cinderella, right?
Yeah. And
so we don't get the flat character of Cinderella where she's an abused girl. That's all we know about her.
Yeah.
We don't know her hopes, dreams, you know, aspirations or whatever. But then in Drew Barrymore's character, we knew her hopes and dreams. We knew that she was a girl with a brain.
Yeah.
And then she had a favorite book, you know?
Yeah.
Not that that's like what you have to have, but something about her that like we started to feel for her and to think she is a real person, you know? And so like they could have done that with Snow White too.
Yeah.
Like, but no, they chose to stick with these flat characters.
Yeah, and I mean, in Ever After also, it starts out very traditionally too, Once Upon a Time.
They're telling a story. Yeah.
But then they don't hit us over with the head saying, this is going to be different. They just show it to us.
And we decide for ourselves.
We decide for ourselves that this is different.
Right. They're relying too much on, they say that they're going to let us, you know, see it.
Decide for ourselves.
Yeah, and yet they keep telling us. Yeah. They keep telling us, like, oh, this is a different type of fairy tale, and oh, like, the queen is evil, but we don't see why. We're just told, oh, like, she tried to, you know, kill me because I was prettier and stuff, but, like, we don't need to be told these things. Like, these can be shown because there's it's a visual image to us. Yeah.
So then I think that's why some of the characters were working, like, or starting to work, like the evil queen.
Yeah, because there was something different about her.
Yeah, exactly. The way she dressed, the way she acted.
And when they showed her in like reality, like now.
Oh wait, we'll get there though.
Yeah, but then there's something different about her as well.
Yeah. And I think that's why Rumpelstiltskin was working, even though it was kind of ridiculous how they
presented him. He just drops from the
and it's from a wide shot. It's like, what just happened? I didn't see it. Even if you were on a huge screen, watching this on a huge screen, what just happened? Did he just drop from the ceiling? It could have been a lot more slinky than that. I mean, when they present Gollum for the first time, he's very slimy and he comes into the screen very slowly, so we get to have this the scale of the character in his environment. But
yeah, if like we just see him from a distance, like you said, and he just drops down. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, oh, hello, you know. And then instead of being told that that's Rumpelstiltskin, they tried to have that like mysterious factor where in the beginning he's like, no, you shouldn't talk to him, right?
Yeah.
She's like, no, but I need to talk to him. It's like we could still have some background on, you know, why is he in prison and stuff. But see, they're always relying on us to know the fairy tale.
Okay, we kind of got sidetracked, but first saying that his character actually worked.
Because he was intriguing.
Yeah, they introduced his character, but they still left mystery behind it. Yeah, why is he helping us?
Right.
Why is he the one telling the prophecy?
Right.
And then, besides it being another good actor, who's actually taking on the role, not just taking on the label. We talked about that too.
The labels, right.
The labels in this show. Everybody's getting labeled, oh, this is Snow White. So then the person's like, oh, look at me, I'm Snow White.
But, yeah. And then like we know she's Snow White only because she fits into the original character. Like she's the one in the box in the beginning, and she's with the 7 dwarfs. So we deduce she must be Snow White.
Yeah.
But there's nothing about her that like she doesn't take on a character, like a new character. She hasn't been
defined yet.
Yeah. Whereas like Rumpelstiltskin, we know his character from
the fairy tale. The fairy tale, bad guy.
Yeah.
But now they've twisted it, which is a good thing, into somebody that might be helping them.
Yeah.
Might be giving them a clue as to how to save their world.
Right, somebody who might have a larger role in the story, and then we're supposed to find out how, and now we're not relying anymore on what we know of Rumpelstiltskin. Now it's like, oh, here's like they said in the beginning, or what we think we know. Yeah, so now like, oh, Rumpelstiltskin isn't who we think he really is from the original fairy tales.
So that works.
Right.
That's why that character works.
Right. One last thing about the ages.
Okay.
The other issue that I had with the age, that we both had, was why choose 28? Like, Emma is supposed to embark on this.
That's a good one. So, we are introduced to Emma.
Another character, the daughter of Snow White and the Prince.
And it's another character that we're supposed to suddenly care for, because we've been told that she's the hope.
Yes, from
we're told
again, like prophecy or whatever, right? Like what?
But we're not even given an idea of why she's special. Right. We're just told you have to care about her, but we're not given a reason why.
Right, because in the other fairy tales, there's always some kind of a rule or like a part of the like how to answer the prophecy. So like for example in Sleeping Beauty, it's like she'll like prick her finger, but then if her true love comes, then that's gonna break the spell, right? Same thing with Snow White. She's going to choke on the apple, but if she kisses her true love, then she'll wake from the spell, right? So we still don't know how Emma's connected in this. Even if they don't want to tell us specifically, like we're supposed to find out later, there could still be hints to it. Or there could be something magical about her.
Yeah. Or something magical given to her.
Yes, there's nothing magical associated with her except that she's the daughter of two fairy tale characters. And the only magical thing is that wooden, like, the tree.
Which didn't even go with her.
It just dropped her. It just transported her.
Yeah, transported her to our reality.
Right, so when she's in this reality, there's nothing to remind her of who she is. Or there's nothing distinguishing about her. Like, what are her characteristics? Like, how do we know that she's a special character? She's just a regular person. But if this is truly a fairy tale, then there must be something magical associated with her. Right? So, I don't know. And then the whole thing about her embarking on this journey to save her parents' world when she's 28.
28.
Why 28?
Why 28?
There's nothing,
no sense of urgency behind it.
Right, and also no meaning behind it. Like, what does 28 mean? I mean, if they had chose 18, it would be like, when she is coming into adulthood, this is the journey that she has to face, you know? Or if she was turning 30,
then there's that thing where they were trying to show in her character that she's in that point of life where she doesn't know what she's doing. That she seems kind of lonely, hopeless.
Right.
But then it would work with 30, because then you're thinking of, what am I doing with my life at that point?
Right. Like, usually when people turn 30, that's when the end of them being, they think, you know, the end of them being young, like they're no longer in their 20s, so now their 30s, like, true adulthood. Like, you're 30 now, you're, like, an adult now, right? Like, you have to start making adult decisions now, like, caring about your health or things like that. Those things usually start hitting you when you're 30. So, she turns 28, but we know she has a job. We know she has, like, a place to live. She seems like she's doing pretty well.
She's functioning in the reality, and doesn't even feel like she's connected at all to the fairy tale land.
Right. The only thing that connects her now is the boy that finds her, which I find kind of unbelievable.
It's very
convenient.
Convenient, that's the word, convenient. So then you wonder why even introduce Emma?
Right. I mean, it's already like, why introduce her son?
Yeah, and why is it a son?
Right, why isn't it a daughter? If things come in threes, like, why? Or if it's supposed to be like a connection between mother and daughter, why not further that connection by Emma having a daughter? In fairy tales, like, 3 is usually a pretty important number, like a pretty magical number. So, for example, in the old stories that children are told, like the 3 little pigs, there's 3 pigs, right? Or Goldilocks and the 3 bears, right? Yeah. Or in Little Red Riding Hood, she asks a series of 3 questions, wasn't it? And then, like, in stories like that, there's things that happen in 3s. So they could have had something going if they had the Snow White be like, she's a woman, her daughter Emma is a woman, and then have Emma have a daughter as well. And then it would be a significant, like, relationship. Not that mother and son isn't, but then it's a totally different, like, relationship.
Yeah.
So if they had that, like, lineage going, then we could kind of see how important the woman's role is. Because they seem to be saying that Snow White is the more, not dominant, but the stronger character.
The one with the hope.
Right. So if they're trying to say that the woman in this fairy tale is actually important, that could be good, because usually in the fairy tales, the woman isn't a very important character. I mean, in Snow White, she's the one who brings happiness to men. That's her role in these stories. She makes the 7 dwarves happy. She makes the prince happy. That's her role. You know, she doesn't end with her opening, like, a school for, you know, like children of dwarves or whatever. I don't know. like in her fairy tale. I don't know if I say that,
but she's a flat character. And then they're telling us it's Snow White, but not really.
Yeah, and then she's supposed to be
that to us in this show.
Right, she's supposed to be the stronger character. She's the one who pushes the prince to put the baby into the magical transporter, right?
Which I think wasn't a dramatic enough scene.
Yeah, that's true.
They could have held longer on that and shown, because I didn't even feel the connection between him and the baby yet.
Yeah, you brought up a good point about that.
Even if it was just a little bit more time, just like him talking to the baby and saying, like, well, like, come look for us or something, or making sure that the viewers know how much the father cares for this child.
Yeah, I mean, they granted they tried to, like, when he took the sword and he went out there and risked his life to put the baby into the transporter, right?
Yeah,
they tried.
That's true.
And I could see that that he was being.
But there's only like 2 bad guys that show up.
Like 2 or 3, right?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, it was way too fast.
Yeah.
They could have, like, slowed that down a little, or at least showed more obstacles in his way, because it is a fairy tale and he's supposed to be like the, you know, Prince Charming, so we get that he's going to get through that.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, there wasn't, again, I didn't have enough time to make emotional connections to the characters. That was my problem. So when stuff went down,
all of a sudden is introduced to her son that she's given up for adoption. And the kid is very adorable.
Yes.
Likeable character. But I still don't understand why they would introduce this new person.
So, if the son is supposed to be Emma's way back to her parents, like what brings her back to her parents, then I think that's not a good connection.
No.
Because she should have been able to find them on her own, like either accidentally or through, if it's supposed to be her destiny, then
it should be something that's drawing her back to her home, because that's what's it's creating a special character, making her special.
Right. Because she's supposed to be special, right?
But it just seems like she was just this lady and she went on with her life, and all of a sudden this new character is telling her she has to come back. It's like the filmmakers are telling us again what it is we're supposed to know.
instead of showing us. Like we could have had this continue on where, like you had mentioned that this first episode could have been drawn out longer.
It could
so
have.
There could have been more development of Emma's character and also more explanation on why she's special. And then that could have tied in with showing how somehow, without us knowing why, or just magically, or because like special things happen, she gets drawn back to her parents. And then we could start trying to make connections, like, oh, is it because that's her mom or whatever? But then see, it's kind of obvious when the characters look the same too, right?
And then it's obvious when that little boy comes and says, "You're the key. You have to come back."
Yeah, so that's another question for me. If Emma is supposed to be the most important character besides Snow White, right? She's supposed to be the reason why their world gets restored. How come again, this goes with like, there's nothing magical about her. How come she doesn't have that sense already, or we don't have a sense of that?
Yeah, like there's something missing in her life that she's supposed to be doing, but she hasn't found it yet.
Right, but all we get in the beginning is, it's her birthday, she's lonely, she doesn't like her job, she mentions that she's an orphan.
Yeah.
But then, like, we want to feel for her, but then they haven't let us connect to her character yet. And then when she's wishing on her birthday, like, cupcake or whatever, it's like we get a sense that she's lonely, but I don't get that she's hopeless, or that there's like something missing. Because everybody gets lonely, and sometimes when we get older on birthdays, we might get sad too, but then, we get over it, and like, life goes on, right? But then she's supposed to have this, like, something in her telling her that there's something more that she's supposed to fulfill. Because she's, like, the hero, right?
Yeah.
So she's supposed to go and, like, go on her heroic journey, but there's nothing, like, significant about it. Like, we watched Tangled, right? That's based on a fairy tale. We introduced to her character, Rapunzel, right? And even though she doesn't know who she is, that she's the daughter of the king and queen, the missing daughter, right? She's still somehow drawn to them through, like, the lights, right? So even though she doesn't know who she is, she's still connected to a clue as to who she is. Like, she sees the lanterns and she's like, oh, I wish I could go see them.
Yeah, for some reason, something about them reminds her.
Right, and then she's turning 18. Like, right? It's like a pivotal moment for people when they turn 18. They're, like, becoming adults, like, moving on from adolescence to adulthood. And then, like, it's her, somehow she gets drawn back to where she came from. And it's not like a character has to come and drag her back
and tell her, you have to
come back. This is your destiny. It's more like, there's something about those lights and I need to go see them. And then that's when she's finds out who she is, right?
And I think this show is also giving us a contradiction about where this fairy tale is. Is it going to be completely separate from reality? Or is it going to
be integrated into our world? Right.
Because it was really weird how all of a sudden she's in the car with the kid, they're going down the freeway, and then all of a sudden they're in Storybrooke. There wasn't even any kind of magical passage that goes to this place. It's like anybody could walk in.
That's right. And if they're supposed to be, because they said our world in the beginning, right? They're brought to a place where they lose their happy endings. That's our world. And so we're thinking, is it supposed to be a message about where we live today? Like our world today. But then they seem to be saying that it's a world of its own within our world.
Yeah. But they didn't even give us any Like, they had the magical kid right there. Maybe he could be they would point out he's the only one that knows how to get Storybrooke.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's just like, freeway, boom, they're in Storybrooke already.
Right, and she just says something like, oh, I never noticed this road, or, something like that.
And there's not even any clear, it doesn't look any different from reality.
Yeah, so is it supposed to be our world, or are they supposed to be separate? Because if it's supposed to be our world, then I get that there's no difference between our world and their world.
Yeah.
But then, it's like they're still in their own little world, so it's not really part of our world, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're not, like, other characters from the real world can't get in there.
Yeah.
You have to be told where it is. So they have to choose like what they want.
Yeah.
Like, do they want it to be like to be reality or
completely separate, like in its own world.
Right. But then we have like you said, contradictions. They still have schools.
Yeah, because the evil queen's spell is that this world is gonna be frozen in time.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get the feeling that nothing's going to happen anymore.
Right, and yet you still have things happening, like Emma still has a son.
Mm-hmm.
A son that is finds his way into their separate world,
yeah.
Right?
And then you said the evil queen, she is the mayor now or something?
Yeah, like and she has a career, a big house.
And then she's the one that she's connected to the outside world because she adopts Emma's son.
Right.
And then you have hospitals.
Right. You have hospitals.
You have
schools.
Snow White working
being a teacher.
There's little children in this town. If this town is supposed to be frozen in time, why is there new life being created?
Yeah, if it's not supposed to be found by other people, then why are other people in it already? Mm-hmm. Are these did they explain to us that these are children of the fairy tale characters? Mm-hmm. And if so, then obviously time hasn't frozen. Time still goes on, but they're just no longer in the enchanted forest.
Yeah.
That's the only difference.
So these characters are supposed to be lost because they don't know what they're doing. They've forgotten who they are. And yet, whenever they see Emma or hear her name, all of a sudden you get the feeling that they know her.
Right, like when she went to grandmother's to get a room, and she said Emma, and we get why Rumpelstiltskin knows.
Because they've established him as a special character that knows what's going on.
And he specifically asked for her name.
Mm-hmm.
So we get why he's all, ooh, Emma. But then I don't understand why grandmother...
Or why Snow White should be knowing it either. Because remember when Snow White meets her in the classroom and she finds out her name, there's supposed to be that moment of the, mother-daughter connection.
Because they stare at each other. I totally missed that. Really? Oh, okay.
Well, because they have the intent eye-to-eye contact at that moment when she finds out her name. But it's like, why? If they're supposed to not understand what's going on, it shouldn't be that quickly that everybody's all of a sudden... Maybe they could start waking up to it.
Yeah, or maybe if anybody's gonna have an inkling, it should be Snow White. But
because she's the character with the hope.
Right, and she's the one of the main characters, and then that's her daughter, so she's supposed to have a connection to her that way too, but not have grandmother and Little Red Riding Hood
looking at her all mysteriously.
Emma? Yeah, because it made me kind of think that they already knew where they were, but they're not supposed to know. That's the whole point, right? They're supposed to forget who they are.
Yeah, and there was a contradiction in that scene too, because first they showed the town. It's pretty clean. There's life going on, obviously. And then they want us to think, it's a rundown hotel. There's cobwebs all over the place.
Like, no one ever stays. Like, grandma's like, really? You want to stay? It's like, if nobody stays there, then why is there a school there? I mean, again, if it's the children, I know I said this already, but if it's the children of the fairy tale characters, then they should have established, like you said, the scope. How many characters are frozen in this? And then, did they have these children already? Because if they did, then that would make sense. But if they didn't have these children yet,
then are there other people coming into this town?
Right? Or are the fairy tales themselves like having
still
children
going on with life?
Right. Then life hasn't really been frozen. Like it just goes on. All that's different is they're not in the enchanted forest anymore. Like I know I already said. Like it's full of contradictions because if they're gonna say that they're gonna put them in a world where they are frozen in time, technically fairy tales are frozen in time already. We don't have to have that because like it's a timeless, forever. Timeless story. Whenever you tell the story, it always takes place a long time ago. So, like, in that sense, fairy tales are already frozen in time. So I don't understand like how evil it is to put them into the real world, you know?
And if they're gonna go in that direction, then go in that direction. Just show them in a really typical, mundane suburban life instead of suburban life, but maybe it's run down, but on the other side, it's still going on with life.
Yeah, and it's kind of insulting to say like, this is their evil spell to put them in our world, and so like their punishment is to live our regular lives. You know, like what is that supposed to say?
Yeah.
If it's gonna be something like evil and cruel, why not have it where life stops for them? And when you go to that place, like Storybrooke Lane, you literally feel like nothing is going on. Because you said you felt like it was a real town.
Yeah.
Why not have it where maybe the same stuff happens again, or, you know, like there's nothing, like...
There's moving it forward because it's supposed to be frozen in time.
Right, like, and so then it's purposeless. How is it purposeless if there's...
A school,
and there's a mayor, a hospital, right?
And there's police. Is Jiminy Cricket supposed to be like a teacher or something? Or no, a psychiatrist? Why are these fairy tale people needing
psychiatry?
Yeah, they're just not picking one strategy. You brought up the good example of Last Action Hero.
Yeah, so that's like a modern day fairy tale. They don't tell it to you, they don't market it like it, but it's like in this case the fairy tale is a boys type of fairy tale.
Action film hero.
Right, who gets pulled into the real world, and then we get...
Through a pretty magical way because he's stepping through the movie screen.
Right, and then what's different about him? He thinks that good will always win, right? Because in the movies, good always wins, right? But then he finds out the evil reality. Good doesn't always win. Sometimes bad things happen, and that's like, that sucks, right? But then that's what he has to learn. And so he can't function in our world because he doesn't belong here. We don't get that sense with the other characters.
Or any of them. It's like they seem to still be functioning in our world.
Right. Especially the queen.
Especially because she's a career woman. She's,
She's anchored by a son, like you mentioned already.
When I saw her as the character in Storybrooke, there's nothing scary about her. She just seemed like you said last night, she just seems like a busy mom who might not have enough time for her son.
Kid. And does that make her inherently evil?
And what's that trying to say about working women?
Yeah, no.
And then the things that she was saying to Emma weren't even bad. She was telling her
it's a closed adoption.
So she's established her right that Emma stay out of her business.
Right, and that's a legal right that she has. There's nothing bad about what she said. And she said, don't think that just because you've been introduced to your son that you're always going to have access to him.
Which is true.
Right, I mean, she has every right because, like she told Emma, you wanted this to be a closed adoption, so you didn't want it to have anything to do with him. Like, so what she said might have been hurtful.
Yeah.
But it wasn't evil.
No.
So, again,
and I don't even feel anything evil towards the son either. Just seems like a woman who's having trouble with her adopted kid.
Yeah, they haven't established, like, he says, oh, she doesn't love me. I mean, a lot of kids say that when they feel neglected, right? But it's like, we haven't seen anything, not that I want to see violence, but there's nothing even hinted as to, like...
He has a nice room, he has a nice house, she obviously is still taking care of him.
She wants him to go to school. He goes to school.
She looks for him when he disappears.
It seems to me like she also has forgotten who she is.
Which doesn't make sense.
Right. I mean, we get the hint at the end that she knows who she is, that she's protecting
she's looking at the
mirror, in her mirror, right? Yeah. But then it's like, I still don't get how evil she is. Like, she's evil because she wants to live in this alternative space.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't seem like a bad place.
Yeah. No, it doesn't.
Right? They're just no longer, like, happily living, like, ever after or whatever, but, like, is that supposed to be bad? Like, I don't get why I have to care so much about it.
There's nothing sinister about this town. Why people are so sad. Are you saying our world is sad enough that we're supposed to be like, oh, they shouldn't be in our world. Bring them back to their fairy tale world.
Right. I mean, if there was something, if they show how they can't function here, then I could feel for them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, maybe show, like, them trying to fit in the real world and it's not working.
Yeah.
Then I could feel sad for them.
They could have done that in Emma's character.
Right.
But she seems to be doing okay.
Yeah,
she had a nice apartment. She had a job, even though she didn't really like it, but she was good at it, obviously.
She had human problems just like the rest of us. There was nothing distinguishing about her. It goes back to what we said earlier. There's nothing special about Emma. If she is indeed a fairy tale character, the daughter of Snow White and the Prince, then why is she functioning in our world? There has to be something more than just loneliness. Everybody feels lonely. More than just a sense of emptiness. Everybody has a sense of emptiness sometime about whatever, right? There has to be more than that draws her back to her parents.
If they wanted to do the whole different, making fairy tale different, then they should have just left it blank.
Right, because why are we given the framework of Snow White? And why are these other characters specifically chosen? Why did they choose Grandmother and Little Red Riding Hood? They have nothing to do with Snow White. But if they're going to choose them, there has to be a purpose to it.
Well, I remember we were having that theory that maybe they're going with a theme of lies and deception, because the characters that they did pick, like Pinocchio, he's dealing with telling lies. Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf deceives them.
Right.
And then, who else is there? Rumpelstiltskin, he tries to deceive people. And
then Snow White, she dies because of the queen's deception.
Right. So maybe they're going for a lie thing, especially since Emma, maybe her special power is supposed to be, oh, I can tell when people are lying. Maybe that's how they're trying to...
Which is something her mother couldn't do.
Oh, that's funny. That's true. Yeah, she could, because Snow White's very naive.
She's supposed to be naive in the original fairy tale.
That could have been something interesting to work with, like showing how Emma's completely different from her mom, and that's what's gonna save them, because she's gonna be what completes what's missing from their character.
And then it would make sense why, like, they would show them as the same age.
Yeah. Oh,
because then they could be like you said, they could be completing each other somehow.
Yeah.
And see, if they were going to go with her having the special ability to tell people are lying, why not have that included into the fairy tale? There's something magical about her, and so maybe they could have established that throughout her life she's always been able to tell when somebody's lying.
And that's what's turned people off from her.
Yeah, because in the real world, if you can always tell when somebody's lying,
you're not going to get along with anybody.
Right. Okay, so... if they were going to choose Snow White, they should have had a purpose for that. But if there's no real reason that we have to be invested in Snow White's story, then why not create another fairy tale and draw from elements? They don't have to call it Snow White's story, but maybe there's elements from different fairy tales. And so there is a character like Snow White. She doesn't have to be Snow White, but maybe she also has dwarves or companions, and she also gets awakened by a kiss.
So then it's a brand new character that we don't have to know her background at all.
But we could just be like, oh, that's like Snow White.
Yeah.
And then when there's the character of Rumpelstiltskin, they can have clues like that they're drawing from that story.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be where we're wondering, what does he have to do with Snow White? But now it's like, oh, so this character is kind of like Rumpelstiltskin. And then we have like Geppetto, who really has nothing to do with these stories at all, but then if they just introduced like a magical carpenter who was able to make things come to life, then he could be the one they go to make the like the transporter, and it would make sense, and we could say, oh, that's kind of like Pinocchio's story, right? Like in Pinocchio, but it doesn't have to be these, like, we don't have to, like you said, label them already, so that when they all come together, we don't understand how they're functioning together. Like, I still don't understand why I have Little Red Riding Hood and Grandmother be in the town, if not just to say, oh, they're other characters from the Enchanted Forest. But then they don't really have a purpose. It's just picking and it seems like right now, I don't know about the next episode, but it seems like right now they're just picking and choosing like a few characters and throwing them together without really explaining how they're supposed to work together.
Yeah, and if they had just gone with a blank story to fill in, then when you start introducing people, you don't start thinking, oh, what about Snow White? I mean, what about Cinderella? What about Sleeping Beauty? You just think, oh, these are new characters, maybe there's more.
Right, so like in the beginning, they already set it up for themselves that they're going to introduce us to all these other characters.
And then we start thinking, oh, that's it.
Yeah, it's like, oh, like she's gonna save like 8-10 people. Yeah. I mean, not that that's a good thing in itself, but I mean, they already introduced the entire cast of characters, and we haven't seen more than like we said 8 or 10, right? So like you said, if they just gave the framework of it being a fairy tale by saying once upon a time, but not labeling characters, this is Snow White, then like you said, we wouldn't be asking for where's the rest, you know? And then then it gives them more freedom too. They can pull from wherever. Why can't the Snow White-like character have Cinderella-like qualities as well?
And then they're stopping us from going forward in the plot, because we see in the previews for next time that we're going to find out why is the witch so mad, and where Snow White and the prince's romance comes from. And at this point, if you think about a fairy tale, when it opens up, we don't really care in the beginning of Sleeping Beauty how the parents dated. Got together. We don't really care why because they're not telling us why the queen's so pissed.
Yeah. We just
they're telling us that from the beginning what line of action we're gonna follow now. That the baby got cursed and the fairies have given her a way out. So that's what they've done so if we take in the context of this show, they've thrown us into the middle of their action. So we understand that this first episode, it's in the middle of their action, which is Emma is coming back to town. But now they're stopping us from this plot by saying we're going to tell you the background, which doesn't make sense at all.
It doesn't. Because like that's where like another contradiction comes again. I feel like they are relying on us as the viewers to have so much previous knowledge of these like labeled characters. So I'm supposed to watch this already knowing who Snow White is, and it's like they're telling me I have to know that already, because in the beginning, if I don't know anything about Snow White, I wouldn't even know that was Snow White. But since I know the stories already, I get it. And so I don't understand why they rely on us so much to know who, Geppetto is, who Snow White is, who Jiminy Cricket is, stuff like that. And then they're going to go back and say, but wait, let's explain more to you. It's like, what is the purpose of that? Like, if you're going to rely on me to know who these characters are, then just like go with that. But if you're going to develop who they are, then it should have started already in the beginning. So that I could be more invested in the characters, to understand who they are and like why this mission is so important or whatever, right? But it's confusing if they're gonna like introduce us to Emma already and Emma's son already, and then say, but wait, I'm gonna come back and tell you about how their parents met. At this point, like you said,
it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't really matter.
They've already shown at the last part of the scene the clock moving forward.
Right, and to me, that was too literal. Yeah. Time stops here. Why? Because the clock doesn't move. Mm-hmm. There's nothing else like important that symbolizes that time has stopped. Mm-hmm. You know, are people growing? No. You know, like there's nothing like has anything changed?
Well, I mean, they were still children, so obviously things were still moving forward. Probably not in the fairy tale way they would want, but
right.
It just didn't feel like something bad had happened.
Right. So it feels like instead of like if the queen was cursing them, instead of time stops, time didn't really stop. It's like they just didn't have their happy endings. Yeah. And that could be a bad thing, but yeah. Like the whole point was time has stopped, and then the literal showing of once Emma stays there, then time starts ticking again, and it's supposed to be like our
and they
great
haven't
clue.
They haven't explained, like we said, why what's so special about her, besides the fact she's their daughter.
Right. So I feel like that was weak. They should have done something more to show the time, like the lack of the passage of time or whatever.
So they haven't given us a visual of what's at stake. We go into Storybrooke and everything just looks regular. I don't feel like anybody's gonna get hurt at any moment. I don't feel like this world's gonna fall apart at any moment.
That's why it feels a little insulting, right? Mm-hmm. That their curse is to live in our world. Mm-hmm. I mean, granted, there's no happy endings all the time, but it's not necessarily a horrible thing to live a regular life.
Yeah.
You know, but if it is horrible for them, like we were talking about the last action hero, he cannot survive in this world. That's why it's horrible for him.
Yeah. So then show the characters that they're in despair then. Yeah, because nothing's working out for them in this world. Maybe the whole town is just aimless. Nothing's
something
going on.
Crazy like that, where we could be like, oh yeah, like she really needs to save them because something's wrong, you know?
Yeah, Emma walks into this world and she thinks, oh, it's just another town. Why am I here? She doesn't feel anything weird about it.
Yeah, and like even if it is saving a few characters, I don't mean to say that you have to have an entire kingdom at stake for your job to be purposeful, right? You could just be saving one person too, but the thing is they didn't make us feel connected to her purpose in any way. If it was just saving one person, let's say if it was just saving her mom, I still don't get that. I still don't feel that. It's like we were talking about Back to the Future, right? When one of those movies, he has to save his future, his family. Yeah. And so we could ask the same question, why should we care? We're not being affected by it. Mm-hmm. But we get invested into the character, and we want him to succeed, and we feel like, of course we want him to be able to save his family, and his family still exists in the future, right? So then that's the key. You have to create that bond between the viewer and the hero, and so we want to see him succeed on this journey. And then like we talking about that visual of what's at stake. They show that in that movie, like relatives fading from a picture. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, so then we get that sense of urgency, like his past is his future is being erased, right? His own identity is at stake. He is going to be erased too if he doesn't succeed in this. So we don't get any of that in this in Once Upon a Time. We don't. I mean, it doesn't have to be obvious, like characters from a book disappearing, you know, but it could have been something like that where we see, like you said, the visual of what's at stake. What is going like the whole thing is that their histories have been erased. You had mentioned that, which is a really good point. That's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Their histories that have been erased, they don't know who they are anymore, right? And they don't know because of that. And not only do they not know who they are, but they also don't have a future. Mm-hmm. Because that's supposedly been erased too. So if they're just stuck in the now, they had to show visually, let us know how important that is. Because they're just telling us, right?
Yeah.
But I don't see the importance yet. I'm not connected into.
I think one one character that gave me that sense of urgency that I wanted to see was the prince, because he was in the coma.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good tactic, because then you've successfully separated him from reality, and then there's the sense of urgency that maybe at any moment this character is going to die.
Right.
Which is true in the fairy tale world. He was stabbed and he was dying. So then...
And his past has been erased,
mm-hmm.
and his future, because he doesn't know who he is.
Yeah.
And, like, we don't know whether he's gonna wake up or not, like you said.
Yeah, and he's in that spell that time has stopped for this person. And then you don't even have a connection between the prince and Snow White. I know they're not supposed to know each other, but if their love was supposed to be so profound, there should be at least a little connection. Something that's drawing her to him.
Right.
And all she does in the scene is put a flower next to his bed. But she was doing that for all the other patients.
Mm-hmm. She even made physical contact with the other patient.
Yeah, that would have been nice. When we both saw that part, we're like, oh, what if that's the prince?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a nice moment.
Right,
I liked that twist.
But it wasn't the prince, so it's kind of disappointing. It's like, oh. So maybe if she wanted to have physical contact with the other, like hold the other patient's hand as well, then maybe when she held the prince's hand, he could have stirred a little, or she could have
there's something
had a moment
more. There's something that's making her care more about this man, who's even separated into a different room in the hospital. There's something there's
already something differentiating him from the rest.
Mm-hmm.
We understand that this is the first episode. So, of course, there's questions that are raised.
And and obviously the show's been planned.
Mm-hmm.
So they've put thought into it.
Right, and maybe we need to see the other episodes to see how it works out.
So this might be them dropping us into the middle of their action,
mm-hmm.
and then they're gonna go on from that. But
right,
the episode was just didn't have a purpose. It was just like, these are our characters. You have to care for them.
But they don't show us why.
Mm-hmm.
They don't take us along.
Yeah,
to experience
They have Emma say, "Oh, I was adopted and I was abandoned at the side of the road."
Yeah, she tells us that, but like we should have seen that.
Mm-hmm.
Like we should have seen how, not just her telling us how she feels, but we should see it in her and how she acts. So again, we weren't fully introduced to the characters enough to where we can make connections with them.
She's the blank character then. She's the princess in the story who starts out with, like all the rest of them, abused or whatever during her childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And then something's gonna happen that's gonna change her world.
And why is it that a male character has to introduce her
mm-hmm.
to her role?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Granted, it's her son, but why have him be a male character? I still think that it should have been a daughter. I don't know if she even needed a child to begin with.
I don't think either.
Right, but if they were gonna have a child, then they should have thought about how they could have made that more significant.
Yeah, more significant.
But one thing I did like was, well, you mentioned that it was a good idea. Like it was a really good idea to have the prince in the hospital
mm-hmm.
in a coma, right? So that he could be one of those characters that is truly separated from the real world, mm-hmm. and truly time has stopped for him,
mm-hmm.
right? But I also like the fact that it was like the gender roles in the original fairy tale had been reversed,
mm-hmm.
where Snow White was the one in the coma and the prince was the one who came to save her. And this time, the prince is the one in the coma and Snow White is the one caring for him,
mm-hmm.
you know? So I thought that was that's a pretty interesting
that was a good
twist.
Mm-hmm.
And we both also liked Rumpelstiltskin's character.
Yeah.
I still don't see how he fits in, but I kind of want to see. I kind of want to see how it fits in. I'll see how it goes. I want to see in the next one. I'm going to see how, if they successfully integrate Snow White and the prince's history. And if that succeeds, then like we'll comment on that next time. But so far, I feel like that should have just been the beginning already.
Yeah, because in this, they just haven't given us or shown us enough to care about. They've told us that we should care, but I don't know why.
Right, and also you made a good point about how this episode could have been stretched out. So it could have been that we meet Emma much, much later.
Mm-hmm.
And it could have been that time literally begins much, much later as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels like the main action is going to unfold next time, but that's not so.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So it feels like now I want to see, what's going to happen now? The time is starting now. What's the queen going to do?
Yeah.
But then we're not going to get that. We're going to get
backstory.
So do you know how the prince and Snow White met? Find out next time, you know, and it's like they should have showed that first. I understand maybe they're trying not to follow the typical linear right, like fairy tale tells us this happened first and this is next, but there has to be a sense to the order that they present to us. Even if it is non-linear, there has to be a purpose to it. And if it's going to be fragmentary like that, why? You know? So I still don't see the connection, but I guess we'll just have to wait till next time.
So this first episode was successful at giving us the cast.
Right. We're introduced to the main characters and to the main problem.
And now, the only reason why we're watching the rest is to see what's gonna happen.
Not because I'm invested in it.
So I think that's mostly our problem then, that they're not showing us.
Right. We're just being told. We're being told who these characters are.
And that we have to care for them.
We're being told how Emma's important, but we're not seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
And like in a regular fairy tale, you don't have to spend enough time with the characters to feel invested in all of them, right? Like,
yeah.
But then you usually are connected to the main character somehow, and like I'm not connected to Emma yet.
And our podcast is as long as the show was. And talk to you next week.